In the last episode we saw the caduceus, rod of Asclepius, the white rabbit and some other symbols as Jack plunges deeper into the heart of Rapture. Before we finally meet Tenenbaum, however, let's just take a quick look at a couple more symbols in the medical level part of the game. As you can see, we have a lot of checkered floors whose symbolism we already know from previous videos, and the caduceus is scattered around every nook and cranny. We also see posters of Eve with their reference to the Garden of Eden and of course the feminine, as well as numerous red roses. And so progressing through the levels we move towards the encounter with Dr. Steinman, a kind of half-crazed surgeon who has lost the plot as he modifies and beautifies human subjects. Stein, in its original Germanic meaning, actually means stone. Steinman then is the stone man, or I would argue, a stonemason. As we saw in a previous video, stone is very important to the stonemasons, who would take an imperfected ashlar from the earth and perfect it into something more divine. I say divine in the sense that in sacred geometry from Pythagoras, God is seen as the great geometer of the world. It is God who creates perfection in nature, and it is therefore in man's recreations of perfect geometrical symbols that he seeks to mimic the divine will. It is pertinent to note that many of those who seek the divine, whether it be through meditation, prayer or entheogens, in other words magic mushrooms, sacred cacti and the like, these people often report that they perceive living and swirling geometric images. This thereby reinforces the idea that divine will, in some senses, rests on geometric perfection. And so Steinman is the crazed Masonic artist. Rather than perfecting stone, however, he uses people themselves as his corporeal canvas. He thus turns the imperfected human body into something closer to God's ideals. We see here, in his dark-lit theatre, 3 women on crosses, and this conjures up a similarity to Jesus' crucifixion between 2 thieves. Steinman is like Ryan playing God, giving himself the authority to mould mankind and create his own Christ-type figures. However, of course, he fails to do so, and we see the women dead and disfigured on the cross. On another body laid down here, we also see a woman adorned with a red cross, and this again points to Rosicrucianism. Religious and mystical concepts are toying with us in this part of the game's narrative. We also saw for the first time one of many of the little girls in the game, who Jack will be rescuing, and I also promised to introduce you to Tenenbaum. Tenenbaum represents the mother archetype. She not only mothers the little girls, but is in fact Jack's actual mother, as she created him in a laboratory, and also the girls themselves of course. It is difficult to say whether or not she's a good person, and in many ways she's responsible for the splicers and all the addiction and misery in Rapture. She has, though, turned herself around and is committed to saving the little girls, so through this redemption we can perhaps forgive her. As I mentioned in a previous video, Tenenbaum represents the next tarot card, and this is the Empress, of course. The Empress, as we can see in this image, epitomises Mother Nature herself, as she sits with dignity and poise, and is clearly in harmony with the natural world. Unlike the priestess that we saw earlier, there is no hint of duality here. The Empress is femininity herself. Any integration with the masculine will be done with her relationship with the Emperor, which of course is the next card in the tarot, and we note the symbol of Venus on the bottom left of the image. Venus was the goddess of love in classical Rome and Aphrodite in the Greek tradition, with the qualities of love and fertility. Aphrodite is described as the daughter of Zeus and born from the sea. Her connection with Bioshock is obvious, as we can think of Tenenbaum as Rapture's Aphrodite, mother of its children, and creator of new life from the sea itself. Jack therefore in a strange way becomes father to the little girls, as Tenenbaum has become their mother. His role is to save the girls for Tenenbaum, and as such we can see him as the new Emperor, which of course is the male equivalent of the Empress, and next in the tarot sequence. The Empress and Emperor are regal protector archetypes and masters of their domain. Jack has now progressed along his spiritual journey from Fool all the way to Emperor at this point, although I would argue not to completion. Jack is yet to complete his integration of the Magician's card, which is only completely manifested when all of the elements are mastered. At the moment he doesn't yet have access to all of the plasmids. The Magician is therefore not quite mastered. He does however now have the power of fire, the sword in the Magician's tarot card, and the earth through telekinesis, but at present he is yet to acquire air and water. These powers will of course come later in the game. And so through meeting Tenenbaum, our hero Jack now becomes the Emperor, but fused with the qualities of the Empress, as he rescues and ultimately becomes surrogate father to the little girls. As I mentioned in the last episode, we ought to also recall that Tenenbaum is also Jack's mother. He is Horus to Tenenbaum's Isis, and it is through the balanced male and female qualities of the two characters that the universe is ultimately to be rebalanced. Jack has a long way to go however, and many more obstacles of course to overcome, and so now I leave you here and will return to Rapture in the next episode, where another character is introduced and more chaos ensues. Thank you for watching.